What's good, guys? Welcome back to Behind the Dugouts. And I cannot leave this for any longer. I'm going to have to talk about Garnacho. Going to have to discuss these links. I did think it would be something that would fizzle out and would slowly die down, but it hasn't. And with each passing day, it is looking ever more likely that we are going to sign Garnacho. It has come out, and there's a few rumours saying even with the signing of Xavi Simons, if that one gets over the line, that we would still look to bring Garnacho in. So, with that being said, I thought it's best to take my unbiased hat off and dive into the stats. Let's have a little look how he did last season and compare that to the wingers that we did have and compare him to Jamie Gittens, one of the left wingers that we have signed in this current window. So strap yourselves in. It's going to be a roller coaster. Let's get into it. Boom. So here we are. Now, I've used the stats from the Premier League last season. And obviously, with Jamie Gittens, I've used his Bundesliga stats from last year just to see how Garnacho stacked up against, obviously, our main wingers from last season in Noni Madueke and Pedro Neto, and the player that we brought in to play on that left hand side. Now, just at first glance, you can see Gittens is looking like the overall stronger winner, especially as you go further down the list. It gets more and more green from him. But in terms of how far the gap is, there's not a lot of difference between Garnacho, Pedro Neto, and Noni in terms of output from last season. So if we just take a look at the goals, for instance, so Garnacho scored 6 goals last season, again, just Premier League stats. Noni being the better out of the three, scoring 7, where Pedro Neto falling a bit short with only 4 goals last season. So you can already see in terms of the goals output, and let's not forget that Garnacho and Gittens as well were both players that were out of favour with the manager. Gittens was, barely playing. It was clear Amarin did not like Garnacho. They did not get on. It was never going to work between them, and hence why it sort of ended so badly between them. So in terms of output, he's still managing in and around what our current wingers did last year, with Gittens being the player with the best goal output in his respective league in 8 goals. Now, we know Maresca likes his touchline wingers to be aggressive. He wants them to take on players, create chances, and shoot when they have the opportunity to shoot. So looking at the shooting statistics, Garnacho is only behind Noni by 2 shots over the course of the season and 20 or so ahead of the likes of Jamie Gittens and Pedro Neto. That means he's taking a lot of shots over the course of the season. That means if he's getting in shooting positions, he is going to shoot, which is what Maresca wants. He wants players to be confident, wants them to take shots. However, there's a caveat to this. There's no point shooting all the time, and we have this sort of frustration with Noni, and Arsenal fans will have this now too, is that he was taking a lot of shots, but they were either off target or they were being blocked. And there is no point taking loads of shots if the majority of them are off target. So just looking at this from that point of view, so Garnacho had a total of 55 shots, with 30 of those on target and 25 of those off target. So he's in the green in terms of conversion. He's probably around like 54, 55% in terms of shots taken to on target to off target. However, it is quite a considerable amount of shots off target, which make me think that Garnacho does get in a lot of dangerous positions. He just tends to make the wrong decision. So if he's getting in those chance creating positions rather than passing, he's shooting, and those shots are generally blocked or going wide, hence why he has quite a considerable amount of his shots off target. Now, comparing that to the likes of Noni, Pedro, and Gittens, so Noni had the most shots out of all 4 players. He also had the most shots on target in 32. However, he did have, tied with Garnacho, the most shots off target. So again, it's another one of those where the players are getting in dangerous positions, just not making the right decision. Out of the 4 players, Gittens is the one that, in terms of conversion of shots taken to shots converting to on target or off target, he is the one that's probably produced the best out of all 4. Again, it's in the green. So his shots off target, again, out of the 34 that he took, only 10 of those were off target, where 24 were on target, which is a great conversion, probably around 70 upwards percent in terms of conversion of his shots to being on target. Again, I mean, it shows why he scored more goals than the rest of the players. So it's definitely something across the board. Gittens coming in is going to increase, but Garnacho's not a million miles away, and he's on par with the wingers so far in terms of statistical wise of the output that they gave last season, even leading in, likes of Pedro Neto in goals, again in shots taken. So in terms of that, he is not a player that's afraid to shoot, which is good to see. You're not going to get anywhere with a winger that doesn't shoot. And we know that he can score goals. Again, one of the things he loves doing is scoring against us. Now, when we look further down, so we take away the sort of not just looking at the goals and how he's scoring individually, looking at the overall and how he does for the team. What does he produce for the team? What his chances created like. So if we go down the list to look at that. So in chances created, again, he is not the best out of all four. That goes to Pedro Neto with 46 chances created. However, he's above Noni and above Gittens in chances created. Now, they've all played over 30 games this season, with Garnacho playing the most in 36 games. So in terms of chances created stats-wise, he is on par and above one of the players that we brought in and one of the players that we have sold in Noni, who was our starting winger last season. So he is creating a lot of opportunities for the team. And if you look down just below that, in passes attempted, he has attempted the most passes across the board out of all four players. Pedro Neto slightly behind him, where Gittens and Noni are both considerably quite far behind him. Now, great, there's passes attempted, there's passes that he's tried. What percentage of those passes are forward passes, which, again, we talk about this quite a lot in football nowadays. The passes that go sideways and backwards don't really help the team. It helps the team in terms of possession and keeping the ball, but in terms of attacking threat and, going out and getting the goal, we want to see forward passing. So how many of those passes were forward passes from Garnacho? So just scrolling down a little bit, so out of those 750 passes, only 84 of those would be forward passes. And I do put this a little bit down to Amorim and the style of football that he wants to play. Again, it's very possession based. So if he's telling players to recycle and come back, there are going to be a lot of backward and sideways passes because they want to maintain the ball. But he is attempting forward passes. Now, he is above Gittens in terms of forward passes, but he is behind Pedro Neto and Noni in terms of, those forward passes being played. Now, another interesting sort of statistic that you do look, especially at 1v1 wingers, is their duels. So how many of, take-ons have they completed? How many duels have been contested? And what is their success percentage on that? Because 1v1 wingers, as Maresca wants them, they need to be able to take on their man and get the beating of them the majority of the time. Otherwise, they're going to lose possession quite a lot and they're not going to aid the team in winning games. So looking at duels contested, so he's had a lot of duels contested. I said out of the four players, Gittens is, leading in that by 299. But again, he's not a million miles off at 265 duels contested. So it's where they're battling for the ball. Now, take-ons completed is where he does fall short of all of them. So it's definitely something that he would need to work on. And this is where you look at the 1v1 situation. So this is what Maresca likes his wingers to be able to do, is to take on players. So out of the four, Gittens is leading by quite a considerable amount in 77 take-ons completed. You've got Noni Madueke behind him. We know what Noni's like. He loved to drive at players and get in behind. He got 45 with Pedro Neto on 34, and then Garnacho with a measly 26 take-ons completed, which means only 26 of the draws he's doing, and the players that he's taking on, he is getting past. Other than that, he's losing the ball, which is definitely something that is not ideal for the type of style that Maresca wants to play, but it is something that can be worked on. It can provide different ways for him to take on players and give him a little bit more footballing knowledge. Again, he's only 20 years old, so there's still a lot for him to learn. And with a meticulous coach, as Maresca is, he will instill his own style of football and might give Garnacho a little bit more freedom than he did have under Amarin, where Amarin was very strict in the style and the structure that he wanted to play. We've now seen with Maresca's starting to be a little bit more open and maybe not as rigid and not as stubborn as initially thought, and we were sort of led on to believe by the Leicester fans. But it is something that he needs to work on. We look at the success rate, so he's only at 32%, where Gittens being at 51%. It's almost 20% higher in terms of his success rate. So yeah, it is definitely an area that he does need to improve on, and is a little underwhelming compared to our current wingers that we do have. Now, a statistic he does do quite well in is fouls won. He's got 43 fouls won, one behind Jamie Gittens in 44, and quite considerably more than the likes of Pedro Neto and Noni Madueke, which means he is, causing the opposition some frustration, wanting them to kick out, drawing in a lot of fouls to creating those set piece opportunities and, creating those chances out of nothing. Now, he's also does quite well in his ground duels. So again, he's got 99 ground duels won, which is more than Noni, more than Pedro, but is behind the Gittens. And you can see here sort of the take-ons, the duels, and the ground duels. Gittens is quite far above all three players. So in terms of, a highlight for Gittens, I know we're looking at Garnacho compared to the rest. Gittens, in terms of statistic-wise, he's looking like he's going to elevate this squad quite a lot in terms of what he can do 1v1, and this was touted quite a lot when we were interested in him. It was mentioned that he's a bit of a 1v1 demon, and the stats don't lie. But in terms of what we had last season, Garnacho is above our two starting wingers in terms of ground duels won. In terms of duels won, so it's not just ground duels, so duels in general, he's above Pedro Neto, behind Gittens and Madueke. Madueke with 106, Gittens again leading that with 157 ground duels. And then if you look at the sort of the success rate of these duels, Gittens is, leading quite far in 52%, almost basically 53% in terms of his success rate, where Noni, Pedro and Garnacho are all, in and around 40 to 45% of their duels, which again, we would like that to be closer to 50% across the board. At least, they're winning 50% of their duels. It's a reasonable success rate at the moment. I would say they're underperforming in terms of their success rate, but it's not, again, I'm saying this quite a lot in this video, he's not far off what we had last season. And again, it's taking that into account that he was playing under a manager that they didn't get on. It was clear in January time that he was going to be looked to move on, and there was sort of no way forward, and he was getting bit part minutes and getting left out of games and coming on as a making substitute appearance where he himself believes he is a starter. And this all plays a factor. More minutes on the pitch, more take-ons can be done, so the percentages can change and it could look a little bit better. But besides the point, it's what we're working on, what we've got here. Now, one stat that he is sort of above all of them in is ball recoveries. Now, it's probably, I'd say, because he seems to be losing the ball more often than not, but it does show in terms of if he does lose the ball, he is going to work hard to get it back. 108 ball recoveries is considerably higher than all of them. I mean, you look at Gittens with 63 ball recoveries, 81 for Pedro Neto, and 84 for Noni. And then you've got almost, 20 plus more ball recoveries for Garnacho. So he does work hard, does work for the team in terms of this statistics. And you can, as I said, if you look down at the next statistic in possessions lost, you can see out of all four players, he loses the ball the most in 342 times. Possession loss from Noni is 285. It's the best, so he loses the ball least out of all of these wingers. And you've got Pedro Neto at 322, and then Jamie Gittens at 298. So he's not far away from Pedro Neto, but again, you would want that to be a lot lower. You don't want your wingers giving the ball away. But if they are giving it away, they are losing the ball, I want to see ball recoveries. I want to see them working back and winning it back, making up for the mistake that they have caused. And he, statistically seems to be doing that again more so than the other wingers that we do have. Then the last statistic I wanted to look at is touches inside the opposition box. So this is very important for a winger. We judge them on chances created, goals scored, and the only way they're going to do that, and the only way they're going to be effective is by, the touches in and around their opposition box. Because, if they're having lots of touches in the middle of the park or in our defensive third, they're not going to be effective, and they're not, playing their role in terms of being that 1v1 winger, hitting the byline, creating chances, and getting inside the box to get shooting opportunities. So, in terms of touches in the opposition box, he is only behind Noni Madueke in terms of touches. So, he's had 186 touches inside the opposition box, which is about 13 or so behind Noni. Noni had 199, considerably higher than Pedro Neto in 127, and the same as Jamie Gittens, only 127 touches in the opposition box. So he is getting more often than not in dangerous positions inside the box and receiving the ball in those positions. And then it's just about what he does after he gets the ball. Is he getting the shot away? Is he scoring? Is he creating, a shot on target, or is he creating a chance for his teammate? So it is a good stat, and to see that he is on par and above players that we brought in and players that we still currently have. So the big question is, how do I feel about this rumour? How do I feel about the Garnacho potential signing? And I think I look at this a little bit differently now than I did a few months back. And for me, the biggest thing on Garnacho is how much of it is down to the player that he's underperformed and how much of it is down to United themselves as a whole. I think United have been a reason that a lot of players have underperformed in recent years. And look at the likes of, Anthony, that's gone on to Betis to do really well. You look at Jadon Sancho, who come over to us. He did pretty well. He did a lot better at us than he did at United. Again, not amazing, but better than United. So I think a lot of it is down to United and how their players perform. But I think the biggest thing with Garnacho, and the problem that I see being an issue for us, is what happens outside of the football with his brother, with this, social media, when things don't go his way and he tends to throw his toys out the cot. And yeah, he does cause a lot of problems outside of football, and that is something that would be very difficult for the club to handle, and something that the club may not want to have. However, if I was presented with the option for Garnacho, I would take him on a loan with an option to buy. I don't think, there's been the price touted around about 40 million. And if you compare that to the likes of Noni Madueke and Jamie Gittens, who have produced a similar output and have gone for 52 and 55 million, he is, 13 to 15 million pound cheaper with the same sort of output. So it's not, it wouldn't be a bad deal. It would be a reasonable price for his output, considering what the other players have gone for. However, I don't think it would be worth the risk in terms of paying 40 million for him. I would take that, and if it is an option, a loan with the option to buy. So if he doesn't do well, we can send him back. However, I don't think United would take that option, considering what we did with Jadon Sancho. But if it's there, that's what I would do. We do need backup for Gittens. I know we've got Simmons potentially coming in, but I think he's going to be tipped more to back up Cole Palmer. So we are down to one left winger. I think Tyreek George will go on loan. So we will be left with Jamie Gittens. You can obviously put Pedro Neto out there, but I think Maresca wants to keep him out on the right. So to bring Garnacho in as a backup, he will come with a bit of fire, a bit of hunger to prove everyone wrong. So he will have that fight, which would, create some healthy competition between him and Gittens. But I think Gittens would be the clear front runner with Garnacho, aiding as a backup, which could work pretty well. I think Garnacho would work well under Maresca. I think it's his type of player in terms of a 1v1 winger. And I think Garnacho would learn a lot from Maresca. Don't think he's suited for Amarin, and I think that's part of the reason why they have fallen out. But for Maresca, this is his type of player. So Garnacho, I think, would not just learn a lot tactically, but I think he would learn a lot as a whole of how to be a 1v1 winger and different styles and different ways to beat his man. So I do think that could work well. But I'd love to know your thoughts on this one. I know, through the fan base, no one is particularly happy about this potential deal, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. If it was going to happen, would you take Garnacho at the club? Would you be happy with it? Or is it an absolute no? Don't go near him. Love to hear your thoughts. Just drop a comment below. But that's all from me, guys. And if you are enjoying the content, please hit that like button. Drop a comment below. Feedback is greatly appreciated. But for now, take care of yourselves, and I will catch you in the next one.